I started out, again, this was late 80s. And if you remember Southern California, late 80s, and I kind of grew up, the people I was surrounded with, the whole kind of wearing the LA Kings,
Me.
Raiders gear,
Yeah.
black and silver. I grew up with a certain
Yep.
crowd, and that's what I wore all the
Yeah.
time. And then here
Oh, so you were one of
I
those.
was one of
Okay.
those, and it was, looking back on this adventure, it was the right thing for my mom to do, was to get us out of a
Yeah.
certain area
Mhm.
and move to
Yeah.
Southeast Missouri, which, yeah. So I show up the first day of junior high and I come
Oh
walking into
gosh.
class in my LA Kings gear, but it was more
Okay.
because that was the style of music. I was NWA,
Nice.
West Coast,
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
stuck out like a sore thumb.
Ice Cube, Dr.
Yeah.
Dre.
So
Yeah. All that good
what
stuff.
was your culture shift from California to Tennessee?
Yeah. So I'm actually, like you saw in the bio, I'm first generation American. So my parents are from Mexico.
One of the themes that you're going to hear in the podcast today is the idea behind having a story. Emma walks us through a few tips on having a successful channel on YouTube and what you need to do with your content. And she talks about creating a story. And today with the podcast, we get to hear a little bit about Emma's story. Emma is from Sonny's Place, and she and I sat down. We're both from Missouri. We're both from California. You guys are going to get to hear this story about how it was literally a couple hours before I was going to sit down with her for the podcast that I even found out that I put two and two together that we were both from California. So it was fun to kind of compare some stories about moving out to the Midwest. We're also going to talk about her homestead area, life with the ducks and the chickens and everything that she does there. We're going to talk about YouTube tips. She's a big YouTuber. So sit back, enjoy the next podcast episode with Emma, Sonny's Place.
I had to represent this morning, so.
Oh, cluck, no, I love that mug. Couple things I wanted to start with at the beginning, and I just noticed when I was looking at your bio that you have, from where you're where are you at now? You're in Missouri.
Yeah.
Prior to that, you were in Tennessee, and then what caught my eye was that you started in California.
Yeah. Born and raised, SoCal girl. Yeah.
What area? Because that's where I grew up, and
No way.
this is gonna freak me out because I was like, this is what I was kind of really excited to talk to you about.
Oh, okay. Are you from SoCal?
I'm from Southern California, raised there as a youth until my mom moved back to Southeast Missouri with me and my brother, late 80s, early 90s. But I grew up in a place called Baldwin Park next to West Covina.
I've heard of it. Mm-hmm. Okay. I grew up in Santa Ana, California. And my parents moved to Mission Viejo when I was late high school. And I went to college in Tennessee. I married a guy from the boot heel of Missouri. So you said Southeast. I was like, okay.
The connection between when people find out that I started in California and they're like, and you moved to Missouri?
Mm-hmm.
So your story is
why? That's the question, right?
It's always the why.
Missouri?
But you have you're kind of one up on me because not only did you start out in California, but you found somebody from the boot heel of Missouri.
Yeah. Well, and I ended up in Tennessee in the first place because, Southern California softball is kind of a big sport. And so I ended up getting a scholarship to play softball in Tennessee. And that's where I met my husband.
So you're a softball player then, huh?
Yeah. Oh, I was. Yeah. Not anymore.
And that was from, so you got the scholarship to which school?
I went to Union University in Jackson, Tennessee.
And what was going from California to Tennessee, though? That's even another.
Yeah, that was a culture shock.
Culture shock. Because just to let you know how I started out, again, this was late 80s. And if you remember Southern California, late 80s, and I kind of grew up, the people I was surrounded with, the whole kind of wearing the LA Kings, Raiders gear,
Yeah.
black and silver. I grew up with a certain crowd, and that's what I wore all the
Yeah.
time. And then here
So you were one of those.
I was one of
Okay.
those, and it was looking back on this adventure, it was the right thing for my mom to do, was to get us out of a certain area and move to Southeast Missouri, which, So I show up the first day of junior high, and I come walking into class in my LA Kings gear, and I was kind of a hockey fan, but it was more because that was the style of music. I was NWA, West Coast everything, and I stuck out like a sore thumb.
Ice Cube, Dr. Dre,
So
all that good
what
stuff.
was your culture shift from California to Tennessee?
Yeah. So I'm actually, like you saw in the bio, I'm first generation American. So my parents are from Mexico. And in fact, they didn't become US citizens till maybe 10 years ago. So but they came to the US in the 70s. My sister and I were born here, and so we grew up in that culture. Actually, English is my second language, so I spoke only Spanish as a little kid. And so I grew up in that kind of in Vladimir, basically. And so, like, kind of a similar story, except that my dad was actually like a hoodlum, and he calls himself that because he was kind of that guy too. And he didn't want that for his kids. And so our outlet was school and sports. And so that's where we spent our time. And, that was it was going to keep us distracted from doing all the other stuff that everybody else was doing. So.
Wow. We might have to have a whole nother podcast then on just our time growing up in California. So were you initially kind of scared then going to Tennessee? Because it's completely different. It's a whole nother country, Tennessee, from where we grew up.
It's funny to say, like, unless you've done it, like, you don't understand what that really means. And you're right. It is a whole different country, a whole different, like, culture. And, growing up in a Hispanic family, like, we grew up in that culture, even though we're in the U.S., right? The community that we're in, the people are the friends that we make, or the families that we're friends with, they're all Hispanic. And so this is our life. And, constantly speaking Spanish or eating our food. And then I go, and the crazy thing, so my sister is actually 2 years older than me. And so every time that I started school, a new school, she was always already there, kind of set the foundation for things. So it wasn't like as intimidating. So like elementary school, she was already there at the same school. Middle school, same thing. High school, same thing. College, no. And so this was going to be the first time that I like left home to go do something without somebody going before me. And not just that, I'm actually the first person in my family on this side of the border that has graduated from college, or that graduated from college. I was the first one. And so there's a lot of pressure, from that too.
Absolutely. So. Well, do you feel like if it wasn't for softball, could you have made that switch from California to Tennessee?
No.
Because you mentioned your older sister kind of being the protective umbrella, maybe, as you go through high school, because she was there a couple years ahead of you, and probably a girl that kind of looked after her little sister a little bit, probably beat you up a little also too, and gave you some trouble.
She didn't beat me up, but she did pick on me.
But I would imagine going to Tennessee then with you're with this softball team at college. That's kind of your new family to help kind of protect you anyway. So you're not there just by yourself, dropped in the middle of nowhere. You at least still had softball teammates to kind of be your family.
Oh yeah, for sure. And they were. The crazy thing though is, like, I was literally the one that came in from really far away. Everybody was from that area or surrounding states. They weren't very far from home. So a lot of them actually would go home on the weekends if we weren't having practices or playing tournaments or whatever. They would go home on the weekends. And actually got kind of annoying when like we had long stints of like games and stuff, and they would complain about not being able to go home after like 2 or 3 weeks or whatever. And I was like, whatever. Like I can't go home. I couldn't even go home for spring break. I was basically at school all
That's a
year
long flight.
until
It's not
Christmas
like an
break.
easy drive, a couple,
No,
two,
it's
three
not.
hours.
It's a 2,000-mile trip. Yeah. 4-hour flight. Yeah.
And did you,
Yeah.
as far as like teammates, when you first got there, was it hard to kind of, like, were most of your teammates from the Midwest, or did they recruit from across
No,
the country? So it was all different types of people.
most of them were from the Mid-South. So you've got kids from West Tennessee, a couple from Kentucky, Arkansas, Mississippi. Yeah, mostly Tennessee, but yeah, a couple from Illinois. So,
And
yeah.
was it similar backgrounds with some to where you're able to kind of gravitate and be friends right off the bat, or was
Oh,
it a hard, for me, it was hard.
yeah. So, I mean, look at us. Like, we don't look like everybody
Oh,
here. And so, actually, I talked to my friend Ann about this over the weekend because we were talking about how, in our entire lives, we've always been that person that walks into a room and we're the only ones that look like us. Everybody
depending on
looks
depending on
different.
the area and the room, sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm in Columbia, Missouri, so it's
Yeah, I did.
and then in Jackson, Tennessee, you're literally in the middle of the Bible Belt, and there's so yeah, for a long time I was always the one that looked different. But talking about the softball team, the one thing that we all had in common was that we were good at playing ball. And so in fact, my freshman year I got put in, we all shared a dorm room together. So there were 5 of us in one dorm room. And that's that's half the softball team, you know.
Right.
And so and all of us starters, all of us really good at what we do, and really strong in our positions, and doing what we're supposed to do, and that was our common ground. And so that kind of sets the tone for those relationships, and then how we play on the field. And my mom's always said that I actually make friends easily, so I didn't have a hard time making friends. But um, I'm friends with a lot of people, but I don't have friends or like people that I'm really, really close to. But there was one girl on the team that I got really close to, and she's still one of my really great friends, and she's actually in the Nashville area. So we still keep in
And just
touch.
out of curiosity, would you consider yourself an extrovert or an introvert?
I'm actually, my husband would say I'm an extrovert, but I also have very introverted tendencies too. That's the reason I have chickens and ducks, and I garden, is because that's my time
Sure.
away from people. Mhm.
So which is a good segue into what I wanted to talk to you about, social media, because
Yeah.
you guys, you're in Missouri with me, but I'm up in the St. Louis area. Where are
Beautiful.
you at?
Columbia.
Columbia. So it's a couple
Okay.
hours travel. And
Yeah.
would you consider that the place that you live, can you describe, are you on a homestead, a farm, a garden? How do you describe where you live?
You can call it any one of those things. So we're on 11 acres in, rural Missouri, and it's got we have a nice house, and we've got a big workshop that we can build a lot of the projects that we need to build. And one of the reasons, actually, 2 of the selling points for that property were, one, it was the garden space that they already had set up, because uh, Missouri is kind of known for not having the greatest soil. Um, and so they already had an established area that was set up. They weren't gardening in it, but they had it, it was cleared out. They had worked on the soil, so that was kind of a nice thing. And they had chicken coops. And so I was immediately able to get started on some of those things. I got chickens. Chickens was like the first thing I did. And then I grew corn because everybody grows corn.
And did
right?
you or your husband have a background in either farming, gardening, or how did you determine like this is the area we want and that you're excited to get an
Yeah.
area that you can garden, that you can have chickens? Did you guys have
Yeah.
a background coming?
So my husband actually, he's from the Boot Heel of Missouri. He actually grew up on a traditional farm. It's a 500-acre farm that his grandfather had started um after World War II. And so that farm, they grew cotton, what else did they grow? I don't know. They grew all sorts of stuff, soybean, all that stuff that they grow down in the Boot Heel. And so he grew up on the farm. He was the oldest of the grandkids, and so he was out there working and, alongside his dad and grandpa for a long time until his grandfather passed away. And so he comes from that background, but he doesn't like, he didn't have any gardening experience or like, growing food or any of that stuff. And when we got married, we moved from Tennessee to Columbia because that's where his family was, or his parents, and we wanted to start a family, and we wanted to be close to some family, and we were not going back to California. So so we came up here to Columbia,
Because he was
and
not going to go back to California.
I didn't want
You
to go
didn't
back
want
to
to. Okay,
California.
that's what I wanted to check.
No,
Okay,
no, we both didn't want to go there. Um, it's because like, and this, like once you taste a little bit of freedom, like you're not giving that up. And so like I didn't want to go back to California where the cost of living is so high, land cost is so high, and you're paying taxes, like crazy. So um now an adult, working adult, I didn't want to go to that. So we came up here to Columbia, and it took my husband about 10 years to talk me into buying some land because he didn't want to farm necessarily, but he needed space. He is an introvert and he needs space. He needs somewhere to regenerate and, re-energize. And, having like his own space to breathe without people like 20 feet over here and
sure.
20 feet over here next to him. So yeah, it took him about 10 years to talk me into it. We finally did it. And I'm the one that actually had an interest in gardening and having chickens because I became a mom and I wanted to make sure that my kids were eating good quality food and that I knew where it was coming from and what was put into it.
So why did it take you so
So
long to
that,
convince
yeah.
yourself? 10 years to do this.
I think I was scared because I grew up in the city.
Yeah.
That's all I ever knew. And so, yeah, it's kind of scary.
It's the same thing that I started with. When I look back on the Brian from even 10 years ago, but specifically going back to when I grew up in California, there's no
Yes.
way that Brian would believe that, one, I'm gardening, two, that I've made it into some kind of a social media type presence,
Oh, yeah.
that I would even consider growing food or wanting to have chickens. It's just not,
Yeah.
although the
Yeah.
area I came from, a lot of the backyards, a lot of the families, and we were in a Hispanic area also, they all kept
Mhm.
chickens in the back, whether
Yeah.
it was against the law or not. Everybody kind of did what they wanted to.
Well, no, everybody
Yeah.
did it anyway.
But I
Yeah.
think it just depends on the neighborhood that you grew up in. In my particular neighborhood, everybody kind of just did what they wanted to. But it's just kind of strange to where
Yeah.
I'm in the suburbs right now, which is where, after graduating from Mizzou in Columbia, Missouri, for those of you that aren't familiar with Mizzou, my wife and I, we moved to St.
Amazing.
Louis, got the typical house that, everybody, suburbs, and you got your neighbors, and you look for the good school
American
district,
dream.
American dream. And we did that for a while. And then in the last so many years, I'm approaching the big 5-0. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I want to do what you and your husband. I want to get to a place to where I'm like
Yeah.
in the middle, like no one can find me. I don't want people coming to see me. I just want to, I am the extrovert. I have embraced my extrovertednism, whatever that is. But I find it fascinating talking to people like you that have these large areas to where you guys are walking outside in the morning and you're grabbing your
Right.
eggs and you're growing all these vegetables and just putting stuff on the table. No,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's stuff that you still need to maybe go to the supermarket to
Oh,
go
yeah.
get. But I'm
Yeah.
just kind of curious. I was wondering what your backstory was in getting to the location that you're in, because it's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
so,
Yeah, we love it.
when did you decide that you were going to do social media in connection to
Yeah.
where you live? Did it start out as
Yeah.
just a personal thing, and then all of a sudden you made it into your kind of homestead content?
So I followed a lot of people with kind of similar histories too. So Jason from Sutherland, Megan Ben Holler from the Holler Homestead. They're all from California, and left and started their new lives on, wanting to basically do the same thing. And so these were the people that I was kind of looking up to and learning from. And, of course, I was already out of California and we were in Colombia still when I was watching them. And finally, we made the big transition to move to buy land and go out there, and which is a huge step. I mean, you're talking about your extrovertedness, and I was like, yeah, I am a little extrovert. I love to talk to people. I love to connect with people, and so when you're out in the country, you're doing all these things on your own. It's like just your family, right? And I've got my chickens and my ducks that I talk to, and I talk to myself and talk to God, while I'm out in the garden, and so it gives me that downtime too. But as I was watching all of these channels, because I mostly watched YouTube videos and followed some families, um, but I noticed a trend with a lot of them, and we touched on it a little earlier in our conversation, is that none of them, all of those channels, as great as they are, and they really are wonderful people, I've met quite a few of them, none of them looked like me. And I was like, instead of complaining about it, like, well, we need more representation, we need more people, more that are doing this that aren't, white people, blonde hair, blue eyed. My husband's white, so
Yeah, well,
not like, and yeah,
I
no,
married a
not
Becky
implying
myself,
anything.
so I mean, okay.
Yeah, and so yeah, but instead of complaining about it, I decided to kind of get out of my comfort zone and step in front of the camera and share my story. And so that's how that kind of all started.
Was that hard to get in front
Is
of the camera? Are you an in the front of the
Yeah,
camera person?
no. So like my profession, I'm actually a web designer. So I'm very comfortable I'm back in the keyboard, like I'm doing the code, put my headphones on, don't bother me. So getting in front of the camera, and also hate to see my face on camera. So or on screen. And so it's like getting over a lot of those insecurities. And then also not being, I'm bilingual too. So I'm like, sometimes I'll mispronounce words. And so it's like, I don't want to be judged.
Hey, it
But
seems like everybody from Missouri, we all mispronounce words anyways. So,
yeah, yeah. But when I first started it, and my husband has always been like a huge supporter, and we were talking about like how we were gonna, or I guess I shouldn't say we. He gets mad when I say we because he's like, "This is your thing. Like, I don't want to take any ownership of this. This is your thing." And so,
but in a good
one of the
way,
first things we
right?
talked,
Is he saying that in a
yeah,
good
oh
way?
yeah,
Like, this
totally,
is okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He's like, because he doesn't want to take credit for the stuff that I've been doing, the last couple of years. And like he'll come in and pop in on videos when we're working on projects together, but like ultimately it is my thing. It's my channel. It's my uh like brand. It's a brand that I'm
Uh-huh.
building. And so anyway, we were trying to figure out, okay, so I'm going to offer that opportunity. I'm going to be uh that Hispanic woman that's doing these things here in the US as a first generation American. And he's like, what you should do? Your intro should be in Spanish. He goes, you should do your intro and your outro in Spanish. So if you watch any of my videos, you'll see I always start out with Hola, amigos. Hola, amigos. My name is Emma, and today we're gonna, whatever. my outro is always, hey, thanks for hanging out with me. Oh gosh, I can't even
Sure,
remember the
right.
outro now. But at the end, I always say thanks for hanging out with me, and then I'll say adios. And so those are the things that I always begin with, and then I end with, and because that's me. That's my thing. And when I was talking to my friend in Nashville this weekend, actually, she was like, I love that you do that. And I didn't even think about it, because it's just become kind of a thing that I do now. But she was like, I love that you do that and that you're true to your roots.
And it's kind of your signature, part of the blood that you've put into your content, and makes it unique, and it makes it Emma. But
yeah.
So it's interesting that you mention I don't know if you specifically said kind of insecurities of getting in front of the camera. I've had the same issues myself, in that when I first started the Garden Voyeur account, which was all gardening, I was very much just consuming content and looking into other people's gardens on what they were doing, because it was something that was stress relieving. It's something that it relaxed me. I enjoyed seeing what people were growing. It got me motivated to start growing some more on my end. And then slowly, as I became more comfortable and getting to know a lot of the creators, I decided to start getting in front of the camera a little bit more, because then it becomes a little more personal, because we all kind of want to see the person behind the account. And my hang up was always, I hate the way that I look. I don't want to have to get not necessarily dressed up. I think it's going to be different for guys and girls. I'll be interested to hear what you say also. But I always felt like I don't look like a lot of I'm not picture perfect. I look like
we don't look like everybody else, Brian.
Like a slob most of the time. I'm in my gardening clothes, or I'm in my weekend attire. I don't want to have to get dressed up. I don't have to, pay attention to how I look. And I made a conscious decision at the very beginning to lower the bar as far as I could in what I show, because once I became comfortable with this, I mean, I'm wearing a tracksuit. I usually wear like a Mizzou hoodie. People make fun. I wear the same hoodies all the time. A lot of times, if I record something in the morning, I haven't taken a shower yet, so like my beard is still kind of mushed up from sleeping. And because I've set the bar so low at the beginning and I've become kind of comfortable with it, there's zero pressure in getting in front of the camera and doing that. And that is one thing that I had to work on personally, is just accepting who I am and what I look like physically. But that took almost 30 years for me to get to that point.
And you kind of touched on it, it is kind of different for men and women. I think that's, whether it's good or bad, I don't know. But again, like I said, I didn't want to be like everybody else. We already had everybody else. We have, I don't have anything against anybody. I think there's a difference though between what some people are posting, which I consider somewhat like aspirational. So like, you're seeing these beautiful gardens and these beautiful women that are, obviously, they've prepared to be on camera. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you know me, if you've been around me for any amount of time, that's not me. I don't wear makeup except for when I go on a date with my husband, or go to a special occasion. That's the only time I ever put on makeup. And I'm not going to do that on camera, like for the camera, because that's not me. And so for me, the big thing is to be authentic to myself. And so that's why I don't do it. And, even like my hair, like, all right, this is my hair. I took a shower, I brushed it, and this is what you get.
I did the same for you, actually. I took a shower and I actually put a little beard oil in, because I was a little, I did feel a little like, my beard's getting a little out of hand this morning. So I had to kind of tame it.
What kind of oil do you use?
Specifically, I don't even know. It's something that I've been gifted from the wife or my family over the last few years, because they're just so sick of, everybody hates the beard except for me. And
Oh,
so,
okay.
which is why I keep it. And
Yeah.
they give me anything to help kind of groom it and to keep it contained.
Yeah.
So, but it's just
Yeah.
some random oils that just make it feel soft, and some,
Yeah. My husband has a
yeah.
beard, so yeah, I get it. Um, yeah, and he always, and the reason I asked that is because he purposefully wears oils that I like. I mean, I love his beard. I have
Well, see,
nothing
that's the
against the
difference,
beard,
though.
so
You love the beard.
yeah. Yeah, I do. I love it. Yeah. He's got a great beard too. Um, but yeah, like I didn't want to put up an image of myself that wasn't myself. That wasn't me. And so, and I have friends that, they're, they make sure that they're dressed a certain way and have their makeup on and then they do their hair. And that's fine. Like that's done. They do that they do that on the
Right.
regular. So like there's nothing wrong with that. Um, but at the same time, one of the reasons I don't do any of that is that I'm out, I'm on a farm. I'm raising chickens are not chickens and ducks, especially like it's not clean all the time. You're stepping in poop all the time. Like you're gonna get dirty. And there's, yeah, I never saw the point in wearing like good clothes to do this stuff because you're gonna get that on you.
But can you imagine trying to find the time to have to get camera ready then? If that is your brand, and again, I agree with you. I just assume everybody kind of do the content they want to do. If you want to get all
Yeah,
done up or whatever, that's fine.
yeah, you do you.
If
I've
if
got
it
nothing
if it's what
against
you
that.
want to put out and that's what you enjoy doing, then that's
Uh-huh.
great.
Yeah,
For me, I just kept
yeah,
I just didn't want to have to make it an extra chore, because if it
yes.
became an issue to where I had to get ready or I felt like I didn't look good that day, then all
Yeah,
of a sudden I would just quit doing the content. And that's not what I'm here for.
exactly.
I'm here to kind of
Yep.
engage a little bit, have some fun. You know, my reasoning has changed over the years on why I have the account of what I do. I want to make it like you had mentioned before. This is pretty authentic. If you come over to my house, which I never invite anybody to my
Yeah.
house, but if you came over and this is what you would see. And what you guys
Yeah.
see pretty much on video a lot of times, that personality and stuff, even though it is kind of for show and it's for entertainment, I'm trying to be funny sometimes. But the
Yeah.
overall, this is kind of just who I am.
Yeah.
So when I roll to my kids' hockey games, this is kind of how I look, just without the smile.
Uh-huh.
When I go to my kids' hockey games and stuff, I look like this. Because I don't
Yeah.
want
You
other
got the
parents coming
dad
up to me
face.
to talk to me. I want to be left alone.
Yeah.
But I come here,
Yeah.
I'm a little more friendly here, but it's on my terms. Being an introvert, it's
Yeah.
on my terms.
You're on your turf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were just thinking something.
Yeah.
Something popped in
No,
your head
I'm
there.
just like, it's on your turf. It is. Like, I've had friends, it's crazy. I was just talking to my husband about it this morning. I was like, having done this though, like the one thing I didn't expect from doing the whole social media thing, is the community around it. Like you're making friends that are all over the world, and like even now, like like I said, I have friends here, but like none that really understand like what I'm doing. And so you meet these other gardeners, right? And so I've been to several festivals. I went to quite a few last year too, in fact, and got to meet a lot of the homesteaders that I followed on YouTube, or on Instagram, and like in person, face to face. And you can talk about something, mention something, and you don't have to explain yourself. Everybody right away understands what you're talking about, right? Any challenges you might be facing with the garden, like growing certain things, or the pests you had to deal with this year that you didn't have to deal with before, issues with your chickens or ducks or whatever, right? You don't have to explain yourself. Everybody already understands that. And you can't do that with everybody. If you go to a hockey game, you can't just talk to another dad and say something like that, and they're going to be like, what are you talking about?
Well,
and then you have to go into this whole 20-minute explanation.
And I don't want to do that. But it's just
exactly.
It's a bigger pot to choose from of people that you may understand a little better when you're on the internet. And this is obviously a good or bad thing. We'll probably end up touching on this also down the road here. It's a bigger pot to be able to find other people that have similar interests, that understand what you're going through or doing the same things,
Yeah.
as opposed to the people that are physically
Wow.
there in Columbia, Missouri for you. Or for me, it's within my
Right.
little suburbia that I see on an everyday
Yeah.
basis. A lot of those people, we don't have a lot of things in common other than we're all on the
Right.
same hockey team.
Yeah. Your kids play sports together.
So,
Yeah.
and for me, that's just not enough for me to want to, and I know this sounds awful, but I don't want to, I'm going to say waste the time, but I'll say that.
Invest
Yeah.
the energy.
Invest. I don't want to,
It takes
yeah.
energy.
I only have so much energy to put into certain people. And I've found that most of
Yeah.
those people that I want to invest in are ones that I've encountered within our community, whether it's gardening or homesteading. There's,
Yeah.
looking at the Venn diagram of things, gardening, homesteading, ranching, they all kind of intersect at some point. And I think we all have some things kind of in common. So
Yeah.
as far as the social media stuff goes, you're on, what platforms are you on, and which one is your main account? And how do you say your account's name? Because I was referring to it as Sunny's Place, but you say it different. So why?
Okay. So yeah. And we knew this like 100%, like going into this thing, that everybody was going to call it Sunny's Place. And that's fine. The only difference is that I am not allowed to say it that way, because that's not the name, because it's Matt's grandfather's name. I touched on that earlier too. I talked a little bit about his grandfather. And he's the one that started the farm. His name is Sonny. And so I named the account, or my YouTube channel, kind of in honor of him, because, that's where that history comes from. A lot of that kind of ag history. In fact, I planted a pecan orchard because he had a pecan orchard on actually just next to his house. So they had their own like property where the house was, and then the pecan orchard, and then he had the farm. And so when they sold it, in fact, they sold the farm and then they sold the house separately. And so, two separate things. But he had this pecan orchard, and Matt's my father-in-law always talked really fondly about this and the pecan orchard, and like, saving it after an ice storm and all these things. And so when we finally moved to our property, I wanted to do a couple things on that property to honor like our history. And so planted a pecan orchard. And then, like I mentioned before, my parents are Mexican immigrants. And so, which is true for a lot of immigrants that come in from Mexico into California, is they work the fields, and some of the fields that they first worked on were actually strawberries. And so I planted strawberries in our garden. And, so those were kind of like our two like stamps on this property. Like this is our land. So anyway, yeah. Back to the question. What was the question? I lost track.
Well,
I got in a tangent.
I go on tangents all the time. I think I don't know if it's OCD, ADHD, whatever it is.
Boy.
I get distracted just when new thoughts enter my head. But
yeah, for real.
You're also another one. Then I have to be honest and say, I just thought your name was Sunny at the beginning.
Yeah, everybody does. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I'm coming clean with everybody that I have on as a guest or just on Instagram, where I just thought that their name was something else. Yeah. And then you realize, oh my God, that's not their name. So it's just recent that I saw that your name was Emma, but I always thought when I saw your thing, I was like, oh, that's Sunny. So now I'm glad we're getting the backstory on this. And I had to come clean there.
No, you're good. So it happens all the time, actually. Even friends, like people that I'm friends with, that I moderate on their lives, like, and every once in a while they'll call me Sunny because that's the name that they see in the chat. And I totally, again, that's one of those things we expected. It wasn't like we're totally shocked about it, but that's why I do my intros the way that I do. Hey, welcome back to Sonny's Place. My name is Emma. And so, just to remind, but if you know anything about YouTube, you know that people don't always listen. And so they're not always going to remember, hey, your name is Emma, even though you told me right at the beginning of the video, but I'm still going to call you Sunny.
Right.
So, and that's okay.
That's part of the game.
I'm not offended at all by it.
My wife tells me she has to tell me 30 times to do some things, and it doesn't register until the 31st time. But
Yeah.
I just remembered. So the question was, as far as the social media
Yes.
platforms,
Right.
which platforms
Now
are
I
you
remember.
on, and which do you
Yeah.
consider, if any, is your main platform?
Yeah. And I think we've talked, or just in my little chats on our posts and stuff. I actually started on YouTube. So that was my first, and it's actually my primary platform. I had Instagram, I do Facebook, and I have some TikTok stuff too. But my primary focus is always YouTube. And so I'm always creating or storyboarding for my YouTube content. Instagram, because I used to just share pictures on Instagram, and then when they really started pushing heavily the reels, I was like, okay, I've got to kind of change mindsets a little bit and figure out what those audience expectations are on that platform, which is actually very similar to TikTok.
Okay.
And I had already done some TikTok. I was familiar with it too. And so it's just a matter of like figuring out, I think, and I touched on this too when I left a couple of comments on your stuff too, is understanding that each platform has its strengths and audience building techniques and reward systems. And so like Instagram's going to reward you differently than YouTube is, and TikTok and Facebook. And so you're looking for certain things and creating content to get rewarded. And so like YouTube, because I started there, it's a really heavy analytics tool. So like that's one thing that you're using analytics quite a bit. And that's why they offer it in the dashboard. They offer you all sorts of analytics to be able to go through and figure out how to fine tune your content to really engage your audience and create a following. And the big hitters there's big three things that you want to focus on with YouTube, and that's your thumbnails. Are they intriguing? Does the title tell that story? Like, is it consistent with what's going on in that thumbnail that's going to make me want to click? Is the title intriguing enough that's going to make me want to click? And then once you click on it, are you delivering on that title and thumbnail within the first few seconds of your video? And then, so there's four things actually. So, and then the last thing is your viewer duration. So if you see in your analytics, it'll have like your average view duration, or it'll have a percentage of like how long your audience was watching that video. And then it'll even show you the little graph of like where they started dropping off, and like you have your where they skipped, or where there was a dip, or where there was a peak, right? On a particular video. You don't have access to any of that like on Reels, right? Because they're so short. Reels are, how many views did you get? How many likes did you get? How many shares were there, right? Those are your things that they're basically wanting you to focus on with Reels. I came from that end where I'm looking at diving into analytics and trying to fine tune. So like one of the things I've been working on is when I'm watching a video performance, like how my videos performed, if I see a big dip in a certain spot, I go back and look at what caused that dip and what can I do differently in the next video. And so I do that. I'm constantly studying, and this is what everybody on YouTube does. Like all of the big channels, they're looking at these analytics and trying to figure out how they can tailor that content to keep that audience duration. You want, I think it was like 60 to 70% average view duration on a video. Like that's like your target. And so there's certain statistics already, like you're trying to get those. And I think click-through rates is also the big one, and, working on that click-through rate.
This has to be part of your web design brain that understands this, because I am, number one, I can barely comprehend or understand what you just said. I understand what you said. I'm listening, but I'm also intimidated by what you just said. And I feel I'm just like, oh my God, I want to just create content, but I also want to be somewhat successful in it. And that's why I wanted to talk to you today about your YouTube experience. Is one of the things for you with YouTube, is it that you naturally just want to do more long form content and that just fits better on YouTube? Or because you just started with YouTube, you started making long form content?
It would be the latter. Yeah, I started with YouTube, and so and for me, it's about telling a story. So like you'll hear creators talk about like
Uh,
storytelling and how important that is, right? Um, and so I actually spend a lot of time reading storytelling books, how to tell a better story, how to actually form a story beginning. There's a beginning, middle, and end, but what does that consist of? And with every story, what makes a movie really great is that climax, that like issue that have to overcome, and then you solve that problem, and that's it. So you're building up to this point, right? It's a story.
yeah,
and
you have got to. Do you coach people in YouTube? Like, will you
no,
help them? You're talking. You're
no,
like Steven Spielberg now. You're talking.
no, 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 no.
You're like Cameron with Avatar. You're thinking next level. And I'm like, okay, first of all, I just started on YouTube as far as creating for it. I've always
Yeah,
consumed
yeah,
YouTube. YouTube's always like
yeah.
my
Everybody
number
has.
one.
Yeah,
Like when
yeah,
you talk about network and Netflix, HBO, I watch more YouTube than
yeah.
I do anything else. But this is the
Hmm.
first within the last 6 months and I'm creating for it. And hearing you talk about all this stuff, I'm just like, I'm in over my head. And all this makes
Huh.
sense because the whole story part of it that you're talking about, and with the thumbnails, everything you just said, as I went through your account on YouTube, and this morning, I'm involved in the story between your ducks and your chickens.
Yeah. Hmm.
And it was just like watching a mini movie. And I'm like, oh,
Hmm.
what's going on here? The thumbnail caught me because it's the way that you have it designed with the duck and the chicken, and you're trying to
Yeah.
you're keeping them apart. The
Yeah.
title on it, I'm looking at it says keep them separated, and this look on your face, and I'm like, well, what's going on here? I tune
Hmm.
in, and then you're describing your ducks and the chickens that you have, and all of a sudden I see you like you're fighting with this rooster, and I'm like, what is going
Hmm.
on? And then all of a sudden, the middle of the movie, something happens to your chickens and your rooster.
Hmm.
And I think you explained it, but then I'm like, wait, what happened? So
Yeah.
just for me right now, what happened with the chickens and the rooster? How did they die? What?
They died from heat stroke, unfortunately. Yeah.
So it wasn't something with the ducks. Like the ducks didn't come over to take out the rooster, or because
No,
you said something about
no.
mating or something, and I was like, were the ducks trying to
Yeah, I
mate with the
touched.
chickens? I was like, do ducks and chickens mate? All this stuff was going through my head, and I'm like, I'm panicking. I'm getting ready to take my shower to interview for the podcast, and I'm like, should I know if ducks and chickens mate?
They can. If a chicken can mate with a duck, and it's not going to affect it, but if a duck tries to mate with a chicken, it can kill it. Yeah. Because of the differences in how they mate. Yeah.
Okay, I
But yeah, so at the time when, and I included if you watch the video, you'll see the little info tab at the top. You can watch that actual video of all of that happening. And what I was doing is I actually raised that particular chicken flock and those ducks together, from when they were from back when they were chicks and ducklings. And but because there was a rooster present, he kept order in the flock. So he's always the alpha, despite the fact that there's ducks and there's drakes or male ducks. The rooster will always be the alpha. And so he keeps order. And then because he's keeping order and taking care of the chickens, the drakes have full control of the other ducks. So there's not going to be any issues. But as soon as the rooster died, as soon as Rusty died, it eliminated that. And that meant that there was no alpha to protect the chickens from those drakes. And so I had to separate them. There is just no, and in fact, like if you read the comments in that
yeah.
video, you'll see that there were a couple people that were like, yeah, that happened to me and I lost a chicken. Or it hurt it really badly. And so totally get it.
I was watching that, and then I'm like, did the male duck try to mate with the rooster, and then that's how the rooster died? Everything was going
Yeah.
through my mind, but I was caught
Yeah.
up in your
Yeah.
video, and then I
Oh, that's
was
good.
looking
I'm
at
glad.
everything, and then listening to what you just said. I'm like, you obviously kind of know what you're doing putting this stuff together. And
Yeah.
you have a little bit of
Yeah.
a background. I mean, as far as like your thumbnails, let's say, and your thumbnails
Oh gosh, yeah.
are brilliant. I love them.
Thank you.
How
Yeah.
long does it take you to do these thumbnails?
I limit myself, so I actually set a time, 30 minutes to an hour at the most. I will not spend any more than an
Just
hour
for
on
the
a thumbnail.
thumbnail.
Yeah, just for that. 30 minutes is my target. But a lot of times, and so what a lot of people don't do is shoot stills for their thumbnails. And so you'll see a lot of times people, like especially when they're new to YouTube, they're just using a screenshot or a still from that YouTube recommends, right? And they'll use that screenshot or whatever, and then sometimes they'll go a little extra and like put text on it. And so for me, like a lot of times when I'm going out to shoot a video to actually start recording, I already have in my mind what I want that thumbnail to look like.
Okay.
And a soft title. So I kind of know what I'm going to be doing. So when I do that kind of lead or that like introducing the issue, I already know what I'm going to say. And so it's like, how do I picture that, or how do I put that in a thumbnail? And so when I'm out there shooting video, I get those shots, I frame them, and then I do my, my like scream face, the whole thing, right? Yeah. So that's all intentional. Like I do that on purpose. I do it while I'm out there with the animals and get everything, right. If you go and look at the Raising Cornish Cross series that I did, that's exactly what I do with every single one of them. As I'm shooting video for this, I'm like, okay, this is what I want this video to look like, or this thumbnail to look like. And I want the text to be here. So I need the chickens to be in this position. And I need to make sure that my lighting is consistent as well, because that's one of my pet peeves is like when you're shooting animals and then the lighting is one way and then you have your face and the shadows are on a totally different side. I'm like, that's just annoying to me. But that's because I'm a graphic designer. Like I'm a web designer. Like this is my job. So these are things that I can control. And so I go out and like finish, I'll get the still of the chickens in the pose that I want. And then I'll leave the camera there and then I go do my pose. And so the lighting's always the same, but then I clear out the area and then I have my background. So I can just layer images as I want.
This is
but that's my
Avatar.
profession.
This is like watching Cameron director's cut on how it took him $300 billion to do Avatar and how he broke down each of the shots. I mean, I love hearing about this because it's super interesting, the behind the scenes of how you're doing this and hearing it.
But if you talk to anybody, like so I have some friends that have, larger channels, that's exactly what they're doing. And so what you're wanting to do is if you want to be successful, you look at what those channels are doing, even outside of your niche, Mr. Beast and all of those, you look at what they're doing and you're like, how can I tailor that to what I'm doing here?
Oh, that's a great,
so
great idea.
I watch things that aren't in my niche all the time. And for that reason, because there's always, I study videos. I study how they do transitions and how they tell the story, how they frame shots. And so, but this is my creative side. Like YouTube's basically allowed me to extend that creativity into a whole different thing that I don't do every day. Like I said, I'm a web designer by day. So I code. I'll have an idea of what we're going to be doing and I code.
Right.
And then when I go home, that's when all the creative stuff starts to happen. I create when I cook. So cooking is one of my, passions.
Yeah.
Love to cook from scratch. And so you've seen some of that stuff too. And when I shoot video, those are my creative outlets.
And so this is more of your creative passion that you're able to, it's the itch you can scratch. So this is all still enjoyment for you as opposed to
totally
looking at it like, I got to shoot a video today. Has it gotten to that point to where you feel like you have to do as opposed to you enjoy doing?
It has happened. So, and I've shared some of those videos too. Cause when I had my first kid, I actually suffered from postpartum depression. And so that is something that still resurfaces occasionally. And so it was like a year or so ago. I because of softball, I have some injuries that that will flare up occasionally. And the older you get, those things come back. And so there was a time when like I tweaked my knee for some dumb reason. I can't even remember why, but it was to the point where I couldn't even do a lot of things. I couldn't do a whole lot. And when you're on a homestead, you have to be able to haul 50-pound feed bags and, move things around and like build things and so I wasn't able to do that. And so I wasn't in a really good mental spot. And you don't want to hit record when you're in that spot. And so it was like, how do I get out of it? But YouTube helped in that because I was like, I need to do this. I need to get out. And so I did. I shared a video about that one thing and brought the camera out with me when I was doing some foraging. And that's all I did. It's just recorded me foraging. Didn't talk to the camera.
Right.
And then I went in the shop and set up the camera and started talking about what was going on. And then I used the footage of me foraging for B-roll.
Yeah.
To kind of support that story and to keep it interesting because people don't just want to see somebody talking on camera. So, but yeah, it's not always easy.
What kind of schedule do you keep for your YouTube content? As far as, do you try to do a video every so often and you try to stick to that kind of schedule? And then in total, you talked about 30 minutes in creating a thumbnail. What's a ballpark time that in making a video for your channel, how long does that take, you think?
Okay, so, and it varies based on what that particular video is.
Right.
And so there are some videos that have literally taken at the most an hour and a half to shoot the video, edit the video, and do the thumbnail. I have some videos like that. And then I have videos that took me 10 hours to do. And some were like I'm piecing together stories that I've shared in the past. And so I'll go and grab stuff from there and pull it in to tell the story. So like that duck video, it's not very long, the chickens and the ducks video, but I was able to pull in content that I had already worked on to support that story and to kind of, tell it better. And so those times it takes a little bit longer because a lot of that content is like backed up on my external hard drives. And so I have to go and actually grab it and go find it and then start going through and figuring out what I'm going to use and what I don't want to use. So...
And
but it depends. Yeah.
Does the amount of time it took to create a video and how much effort, does that translate into how popular that video is?
No.
Or is it kind of inversely related to where the more time and effort and the more you think it's good stuff, the less it appeals or the less traction it gets? Do you get caught up in stuff like that?
So it's a very common thing. So I'm also part of a couple of groups on Facebook that are specific to YouTube creators that are homesteaders. So there's 2 groups that I'm in, and that's the constant discussion is like, oh my gosh, I worked on this video. I was so passionate about it. I was so excited about it. It's like one of my best videos. And I put it out there and it tanked. And it's just like, oh yeah, we've all done it. Like it sucks. Absolutely sucks because you're so proud of it and all the work that went into it and you want it to do really well. Oh my gosh, everybody's going to love it. And they don't. And then you have a video that you shot in 10 minutes and it's not great. And there it goes. It's like, whoa, one of your better videos. Right. And you're like, why? And so, yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of like humbling in the process. And so, I was actually an art student in college, and
this all makes sense of seeing the quality of like your thumbnails, you talking about what you do with setting up the storyboarding of your videos and preparing before you go shoot things. All of this, you're an arts. Keep going. I don't want to interrupt you, but this all makes sense why everything looks so good.
But one of the things that I learned as an art student in college, I worked in ceramics and sculpting with clay. And there's a whole process, you know, as you're working with clay and molding it and like trying to make sure that you're removing air pockets or whatever, so that when you actually put it through the firing process, it doesn't blow up, completely blow up, right? Because what happens to a pocket of air that's encapsulated by clay that's hardening when it's superheated to 1800 degrees? It turns into steam and it has to go somewhere. Well, that's what happens. It just blows up, and sometimes it'll break things that are in the areas surrounding it. So then you're breaking pieces that other people worked on.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that can go wrong in the firing process. But what that taught me is not getting attached to my work, or getting this like big ego. So because at any time you could lose that piece or that thing that you spent all that time on creating. And so all of that translates into what I'm doing day to day now. I do that at work. Like if I have a project that I'm working on that I'm like, oh, this is gonna do really well. I'm really hoping, or it's gonna improve our click-through rates and like our lead submission by this much. And it tanks. And instead of like sitting there and like licking my wounds, I'm like, okay, so what was it about it that didn't work? And let's fix that and test it again. And so I take that same like mentality into what's going on with my YouTube stuff. And my friend Ann actually told me, she's like, kill your darlings. If there's something in your video where you see those analytics and you see that trend and you see that dip, cut it. Just cut it. And I was like, okay. Like she was the one that reminded me like, hey, this is how brutal you have to be if you want to be successful and you want to, you know, improve your duration on those videos. Yeah, it's all hard stuff. Like again, like I kind of had that foundation set for me, so it's a little easier for me to do some of
Right.
that. Some people it takes a little longer to get to that point to do. But yeah,
I got to think, not taking it personal and just being aware of what you said, that,
you know,
killing your darlings, and then some of the work that you put out there that you think is this brilliant piece that doesn't resonate with either the viewers or more than likely doesn't resonate with the algorithm that's being pushed out there. But that has to kind of ebb and flow on a weekly basis, or maybe even on a daily basis, to where some days you can detach from that and it doesn't affect you personally. And then there may be a day to where you're just like, oh my God, I'm not worth anything because
I'm a failure.
I'm a failure.
Why am I even doing this?
And you know in your head that's not the right way to think about it, but it just you're going to be caught
human.
on a weak day. You're going to have a weak moment, and you're going to think,
yeah, for sure.
and you know that, and the quality of your work is, I mean, top notch, and yet you still kind of suffer from it.
Oh yeah, everybody does. Yeah. But, and even then, like knowing all these things, like there's still times that like, it hurts my feelings. Yeah, for sure. And it's really discouraging. But the wonderful thing about YouTube is that it treats each video as its own thing. It's isolated. So even though you had one video that tanked,
okay,
you can work on the next video, and that video is another chance to kill it, you know, to really kill those
to do well,
those statistics. Yeah, to do really well. And so that's the benefit of YouTube, is that it doesn't look at everything as a whole. Like your analytics, it doesn't look at it as a whole. You can have crappy videos, and then you create one video that just hit the algorithm, and boom, it takes off.
So you get a chance to kind of start over each time.
It's a do-over,
which I guess
every time.
is a good or bad thing, depending on how you look at that.
Well, it's a good thing. And even like you can have a video that just hits that algorithm right and it blows up. And what that does is it creates exposure. So if you've been working on your craft, if you've been really working on creating good, solid videos, if you have one that takes off, people that really like that are going to go back and look at, ooh, what kind of content are they putting out? Like, I'm more interested because they got me on one video. I'm going to go check it out. You've done it, right? You probably watched a video and you're like, this is actually really good. What else are they creating?
Yeah. As a
I'm
consumer,
interested in,
yes. As a
right?
consumer, it makes me
Yeah.
that one video. I'll go and check out their stuff.
And then you go and look, okay, am I interested? Am I going to want to watch more of their things?
Interesting.
And so that's why you still make an effort every time. You still want to do that and be consistent. The biggest thing is just being consistent. And that's what I've struggled with, is being consistent. So like, I won't release a video every week sometimes. I took a break in December. I was like, I'm not going to do this. I think I talked to you about it. Or we chatted about it. Like, I took a break and just refocused on what I was going to be doing this year, what my content was going to look like, because I'm actually changing direction a little bit in terms of like my messaging and the stories that I'm going to be telling. And a lot of that has come from conversations that I've had with some friends about my story and what makes me unique, because that was the whole reason I started, is that I'm not like everybody else. But what is it that makes me unique? And I need to tell that story.
Now, is that changing directions with this account, or is that splitting it off into now you've got maybe two different accounts, one to tell a different story?
No, I'm not doing two different accounts. That was just way too much work. What I'm doing is changing the direction of the content, if that makes sense. So all that content that I've created is still relevant.
Yeah.
Like, all the stuff I'm doing, I'm not changing, like, oh, I'm going to go to the city, or I'm going to do this. It's still all within the context of homesteading and what I do every day. It's just that so this year I'm actually going to be diving more into the why of what I'm doing. And that's a whole other discussion. So I'm like, there's a big why.
It's the deep cut.
It
the
is.
deep cut of
and
the
that's
album.
what I'm going to be doing. Yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing this year. And so these videos that I just did this month, like, they're kind of setting the tone or the foundation for what's to come.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Well, let me ask you a specific question, and then we'll wrap it up with some tips for users coming from, let's say, Instagram that want to give YouTube a try. What percentage, when you're looking at content that you're going to make for, let's say today, for your next project that you're going to record, what percentage, because it's not always zero-sum game, 100%, in that you do content just for you, or that you do content for your subscribers. There's always a blend of, that's a mix of kind of what I just want to do, and then that's going to resonate in what I think people want to see. What percentage of that, when you kind of look at it, is it 50-50 of what Emma wants to do, regardless of what the analytics say? Or is it 80-20, 70-30? Break that down for me.
So in the past, I viewed it like that. I viewed it by percentages and how I was going to break down that content. Because a lot of the questions I had earlier on in the process is like, I had one video a couple years ago that just completely took off. And I was like, I have no idea why. It's one of my crappiest videos. Why? And somebody was like, well, that video did really well. You should do more videos around that content. And I was like, okay, like, I bought into that. Like, okay, I'm going to do more. It was the DIY nesting boxes that I did. Just blew up one day. And I was like, okay. And everybody's like, you need to do more DIY stuff like that. It's geared towards like your chickens or chicken coops or whatever. And I did that. But then there were also other videos that were more about, that I called my storytelling videos, where I got to share a little bit more of my story. And those didn't do as well, but they got a lot more engagement. So I had a lot more people responding to those videos in a more heartfelt way than these over here that are more like, well, how did you do this? What are the dimensions? Right?
Right.
Those are two different types of videos. And so for a long time, I was trying to do those things. So you got 50-50, right? But having had these kind of harder conversations late last year with people, and listening to my story and like why I'm doing what I do, they were like, you need to tell that story. now how to build a chicken coop or how to do nesting boxes. Like, those are all kind of great, but at the same time, like, your story is unique, but it's also relatable.
Uh-huh.
Somebody out there has that story, or they have similar challenges. And so even though it is more of me just telling my story and being, you know, just sharing what I want to share, it's still relatable and it's engaging and it's interesting.
Right.
Because everybody has a story. Everybody's unique. And so it's just figuring out how to tell that story to make it engaging and to make it interesting and to make it relatable.
Right. Well, that's an interesting way to kind of describe the different types of content, because you're right. There's certain types that you're going to create, like your nesting boxes, to where people can consume that information, take it, and go do something, and then there's no engagement. And that's not good or bad or successful. That's just the type of content that is.
It is what it is.
They take that content and then they can go do DIY.
Yeah.
You go do.
Yes.
Other than maybe they come back and say, hey, Emma, thanks for that content. That really helped me out. But a lot of times you don't hear that. So they take and go. But then it's
really great when you do, though.
Yeah, it is. It's so cool. It's like, you know, hey, I'm that's awesome. And then there's the content that maybe doesn't hit that many people, but it touches somebody to where it kind of matches up with something within their personal story, and then you get the engagement. So there is different types of content that way. I've never looked at it really that way, but that's really I like that. So here's what I want to do to kind of bring to a close the podcast. There's going to be a lot of people that when they listen to this podcast, they're coming or they're on Instagram right now. You're familiar with Instagram. And there's several of us that are giving YouTube a try in putting content and trying to develop a channel or whatever. What are maybe 3 or 4 tips that you would give to somebody that is wanting to come from a platform like Instagram or TikTok and they're wanting to do maybe YouTube?
Yeah. Gosh. I have to think about this one a little bit because for me, it was the opposite. Right. But the whole reason, again, is like figuring out what it is, what you want your message to be and what you want your brand to be on YouTube. It's not Instagram. Instagram is very like short snippets, very kind of quick and easy, right? That's one of the reasons. That's one of the appeals of it, is because you can share content really quickly. Doesn't take a lot of time. But think through what that messaging is going to be and how you want your brand to be consumed on YouTube. Figure out your audience. Who's your audience? Who are you talking to? One of the techniques I used actually to get better at talking to the camera is somebody told me, find that person, either a friend, coworker, family member, like whatever specific topic that you want to cover that particular day. Find that person that has asked those questions or has been curious about your life, and look at the camera and talk to them.
A specific person is what you're saying.
Yeah, picture a specific person.
Okay.
And talk to that person. And it made it so much easier for me to talk to the camera. So you'll notice a difference. Like if you watch like my first couple videos, they're crap. But you watch them now, and even the ones you can't tell when I'm reading a script. So, because there's some videos where I wrote a script and I read it. But you can't tell because I worked really hard when I wrote that script. I wrote it the way that I speak, and I wrote it the way that I would tell someone.
Okay.
And so when I'm reading it, it makes it super easy for me to actually just do it. But I talk to the people that I picture in my head. That's who I'm talking to. Figure out who you're talking to.
Okay.
When you're creating these videos. And then what value are you providing to them? You're taking them away from this platform that's maybe a minute of time of investment, into potentially 5, 10, 15, 20-minute video. What is the value proposition? What's going to keep them engaged?
And let's say that all the background and skill set that you have, let's say that you don't have that coming from Instagram, because a lot of us coming from Instagram, we're just used to really quick. You talked before about that used to be the platform that we would take pictures, and then that's just, you upload your picture, caption, that was it. Reels, you do real quick video. Let's just say you don't have the directorial art background that you have.
Yeah.
Is that...
Well, not everybody does. Yeah, not everybody does. I'm fortunate because that makes things some parts of it makes it easier for me. But there are people that can do other things better than I can. And so one of my friends, Morgan Gold, from Gold Shaw Farm, amazing storyteller. And I watch his videos and study them. Like, I study his videos and how he tells a story and how he frames it. And another friend of mine, he's also in Missouri, Jake and Becky from White House on the Hill. They're out towards St. Joe. Great storytellers. And so I watch these channels just to study. So if you're wanting to get better at that, whatever it is that you're wanting to do better, focus on that one thing for a little while. Study the process. That's the one thing nobody talks about, is studying the process. A lot of the people that are really successful on YouTube, they study the process. They study how to tell a story. They study analytics on thumbnails, titles, and just the whole how to read analytics. You know, you were talking earlier about how that just kind of sounded intimidating, and it's like, even though I'm more familiar with analytics, it's still intimidating because it's a whole different type of analytic than the one I do at work. And so it's being able to see what statistics actually matter in all that data that YouTube's giving you and focus on those things. Because of all of that data, you can get lost in all that data. You want to focus on the key points.
Okay. Is it possible to just come to YouTube to have fun, let's say?
Yes, totally. Yeah.
But would you just have to readjust your expectation that that may not translate to a lot of views? Because I'm coming from an avenue on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, especially with the podcast itself.
Yeah.
I'm still kind of leaning more towards where 90% of all of this is just stuff that I want to do for fun.
Yeah.
But there is a rational size part of my brain that's like, but if you can make it somewhat more appetizing for other people to want to consume that,
right,
there may be a little bit of a nugget of success, which it's all relative, the success meter that we all are looking at. But is it possible to just come onto YouTube for the time being at the very beginning when you're just learning to pop out of the Instagram, TikTok thing, to just do stuff for fun?
Yeah, totally. You can do that. It's just know that you have to set that expectation that it's probably not going to do very well. Like, you might be used to the success you're seeing on Instagram and think that you're going to be able to do that and have that same success right away on YouTube, and that's not necessarily true.
Mm-hmm.
It can be, but that's not always the case. And so just come at it with that expectation of, this is probably going to suck, but hey, I'm going to do it because one, I'm having fun. Two, I'm trying to figure out what my presence is going to be here on this platform. And three, that's buying you time to learn how to read the analytics and how to tailor your audience and content for that audience. And so it's all a learning opportunity, all of it from the beginning. And that's why, like, I come at it from a couple of years of experience now. And that's why I say those early videos are crap, but they stay there because that's when I started. And that's when I really became a student in that whole process.
Would you say,
and so
is it, what about would you have to almost go through that crap period? And I'm not saying your stuff is crap. You're saying your stuff early on was crap. But do we have to
Yeah.
go through a period of just posting stuff, regardless of if it's good or not, just to kind of feel it? Or should we be more
And
concerned with, I don't know if this is the right thing to post, so then don't post it? Kind of like,
right.
perfection over just getting content out.
Yeah. That depends on you and your situation. Like, what do you want to do?
Right.
If you, some people will like it just takes off. Sometimes it's really relatable and people enjoy it, or it's like really entertaining to them, depending on the personality, right? Because personality matters. And so it just depends. You never know. And because there's some channels that do really well that they're literally just talking to a camera, like with their voice like this, and it's not very engaging, but for some reason it performs really well, right? And so it's just a matter of what it is that you want to do and how you want to,
Right.
what your presence is going to be on it.
It's fascinating when I think about the accounts that, whether they're on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube,
Okay.
that I follow, that I am engaged with. A lot of the times it's the personality of that person that I have a connection with, regardless of how well like production stuff looks, or I'm the person that's there is the content all the time.
Yeah.
And I can't necessarily put a finger on why I'm watching it, but I'm vested in their story. So maybe there's a sneaky way that where they've crafted this story, and it may not resonate with some other people, but I resonate with Emma and her stories, whether or not whatever she's doing, whatever's going on. But there's certain accounts to where, like my wife or maybe a friend of mine, they'll be like, I don't get this. And I'm like, that's okay. Because I do. And it's just,
well, it's not. Yeah. Yeah, there's going to be times that happens, and that's fine. Also, the other thing is more on the technical side too. Like, phones are perfectly good cameras. Don't, use the phone. But the one thing I would suggest is make sure that your audio is good.
okay.
That's my biggest, most people's big pet peeves on YouTube is audio.
So
making sure that people can hear you, that you're not mumbling, and that your music, if you include music, that it's not like, at a higher level than your voice.
That it's competing with what is either being said or what's going on.
That's distracting. Yeah.
Great. A lot of great tips. I really appreciate you spending the time this morning, sitting down with me
Thanks
on the
for inviting
podcast.
me. Yeah.
This is the first time you and I have had a kind of a discussion one-on-one, which is why I'm doing the podcast, is that I'm bored with all the other stuff.
Yeah.
The Instagram stuff and posting the pictures and the reels. I've done it all for 8-9 years already. I can't keep showing the same lettuce that I'm growing and how to do this or that. I get bored with things after a while. And embracing being an introvert, a lot of the shallow stuff, I'll say shallow stuff. I don't want to offend people. I'm not picking a fight, but I'm not geared towards a lot of just shallow type things. And touching base with somebody one-on-one, as intimidating as it is, this interests me. But I will tell everybody out there, and I have since I started the podcast, I'm a nervous wreck leading up to every single podcast, every single live.
Yeah.
I am not good at this. I've joked with a couple other people that I've had on the podcast. One, Zach and I, we're both introverts with social anxiety issues, to where we both admitted that we were hoping to cancel on each other and to keep canceling, even though we wanted to do it. And once we got done, we had a great time and it was fun.
Yeah.
But there's just certain things that it's still hard for me to do, but I am addressing those things with Instagram, with YouTube, with starting this podcast. I'm working on some other issues and I'm making small steps, but in the end, I find this so much more enjoyable. This is fun. And being able to get to know you a little bit more. And again, you and I have touched just a little bit here and there.
Yeah. Yeah. On Instagram, I think we've been following each other for quite a while, like through I think it was my personal account and then the Garden Warrior. And so it was like, because I remember when we first touched base, it's been a couple of years now, maybe, I think.
Well, it's been a few years. I remember.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah. And I don't know if it was like a Missouri thing at first that kind of.
Yeah. Well, that's what intrigued me, is that you were in Missouri and we're in the same growing zone. And so obviously I want to follow people that are in a similar kind of climate to me, because the stuff that you're doing is the stuff that I'm going to be doing at the same time.
Okay.
And so like our timing is the same, right? Because we are in the same zone and we are in the same state.
Sure.
And chances are we're getting the same weather at the same time, right? Yeah. I might get it a couple hours before you do, but you're getting that. Like if we get snow, you're going to get it.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons that I was that you kind of stuck out to me, because I was like, hey, he's doing this stuff too in my area. I want to follow those people because what you're doing is I can relate to. And Cindy, who's one of my Facebook friends, I think she went through the Master Gardener class with you.
Okay.
She's also from the St. Louis area.
Okay.
And so anyway, like, yeah, like just following these people, like building a community like here online that's going to understand what you're doing and actually help you when they're posting things, like when you're posting things about your compost or whatever. I'm still freaking jealous about you being able to get chip drops you don't even understand. What? Because I can't get them. I'm too rural.
Emma, we can't have it all. You've got just about everything going your way. Give me chip drop at least, you know?
I'm so jealous. I just want one load.
I remember one of the first, I think you were on a live, and I don't know if it was Instagram or YouTube, and I just stumbled upon it. And you were there. I don't know. Were you working on, do you guys like make your own knives or something? Or were you making?
My husband does. Yeah. He's a knife maker. Yeah.
And I remember I'm like, this is before I think you and I really were chatting at all. And again, it's not like we're in each other's DMs every day or something. This is
no
here and there. But I just stumbled on a live to where you're there whittling and I'm like, what the hell is she doing?
Yeah.
And you would think that it's not engaging or like, because you weren't really talking to the camera. You were just, at least the time that I was watching you weren't. And you're just there doing something. And so I just found myself kind of watching. And I think I made a comment like, yeah, what's going on here? And I think I think I asked, okay, I was like, well, do you sell the knives? Does he sell the knives? Where do we see them?
Yeah. No, we don't do any of that. Like we just do things for ourselves, like just like our food. We grow food just to feed my family, or I grow the food to feed my family. I raise meat chickens to feed my family. Everything that we do is kind of self-contained. It's just for us. I would like at least my husband to get to the point where he can start selling knives, because he's a really good knife maker. But that's what he's working towards, and that's fine. Like, you know, he's going at his pace. But yeah, in terms of all that, like, no, our goal isn't to like sell the stuff that we're doing or making here. Yeah.
At least not today, but who knows down the road.
Well, no, you never know. Yeah. You might get a t-shirt that says Hola.
There you go. How awesome would that be? Yeah. When you were
I do have a t-shirt actually.
Is that part of is like part of the merch? Do you do merch stuff?
Yeah, it is on my merch.
Okay, I'll have to take a look at that.
Yeah, it's Hola amigos with the little hand, and then because every time I hop on a live chat, that's what I say, and I say Hola amigos, and I have the little wavy hand. That's
brilliant, because that's my signature. That's the signature. That is your brand of everything that you do, that you carry over, no matter what kind of content or whatever. One thing here at the end is just kind of funny. When you were mentioning the pottery stuff, that was it classes or what?
Well, I studied.
You studied, okay.
Ceramics.
Have you seen some of these lives on TikTok where
No,
the lives are just crazy in general.
I don't really check into the lives on
Well,
TikTok because it's kind of scary.
it's definitely scary, and the things people are doing on lives, and not
Yeah.
much less the people that are watching them do it. But here's the big thing now. It's just funny that you were mentioning the pottery stuff. Is the big thing on TikTok, and don't ask me why I was watching it. I was studying.
Mhm.
It was
Yeah.
just interesting. It was, trust me. I know this is not going to look good for me, but it's these girls that are doing
Oh,
the
no.
pottery stuff
Yeah.
with the camera at a certain angle, and they're wearing just certain
Uh-huh.
things, but they're working on. You can imagine. And
Mhm.
I
I
saw
can.
one live. I swear, as I'm just scrolling through, because it's just weird stuff. Weird stuff, different stuff.
Yeah.
But they're all in
Mhm.
the amount of
Yeah.
people watching. There was a couple thousand people watching,
Well, yeah.
making and badges or tips or whatever it's
Yeah.
called on TikTok flying everywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm like, can a guy do? It's like, I need to learn
Yes.
how to do something.
Totally. Yeah.
And
It's equal opportunity.
but it's just when you said that, I was
the
just like,
platforms are equal opportunity. Yeah.
oh my gosh. Well,
Which I find hilarious because if you have your garden voyeur account on TikTok,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, think about it.
Yeah. So anyways, when you mentioned that, I had to bring that up. But Emma, I appreciate you coming on for your morning
thanks
here.
so much. It was fun.
And we are at the end of the podcast. So all this.
All right, I hope you guys had a lot of fun with that episode as much as I did. And I'll tell you what, I don't ask for a lot. I mean, I do, but I don't. You guys have come through for me and given me reviews. I love it. Thank you guys very much for leaving reviews on whatever podcast platform that you guys listen to the Tossing Salad podcast on. It really helps the podcast get out there and get heard. If I can just ask one more thing, it's not going to cost you anything. It's going to cost you zero, maybe other than like 35 seconds of your time. We've set up a YouTube channel so that we can get the full clips of the podcast on so you guys can see them and watch. Not only get to listen to the podcast, but you guys get to actually see all the things that you may miss during the podcast. It's great. If you guys can go to YouTube, Tossing Salad Podcast, subscribe. Again, costs you nothing. Helps the podcast channel, helps me out. I would greatly appreciate it. Again, we're working on some fun episodes coming up. Stay tuned. We'll see you next time.